I've told this story to myself so many times that sometimes I forget where it truly begins. But I'm going to start here, in the house where I currently live, on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, trying to find the courage to tell what happened with my oldest son. My world turned upside down because, of all people, he decided that I shouldn't be present on the most important day of his life. I raised my oldest son, whose real name I won't mention out of respect for him, in a house very different from this one. Back then, when we lived in Tucson, I worked too much and was always stretching money to cover debts. He grew up watching that. He grew up seeing me get home close to 10 at night, exhausted after 2 jobs, still trying to help with homework while my youngest son cried in the crib. My ex-wife, who at that time I was still trying to understand, used to come and go from the house, always wearing that lost expression, as if she were living somewhere she never wanted to be. I hoped all of that would change. It didn't. Today, I realize how strange it was to see my oldest son announce his engagement with such brightness in his eyes. A brightness that reminded me of mine when I was young and believed love fixed everything. He invited me to dinner at a simple restaurant near downtown Flagstaff that evening, and I swear I almost cried seeing how happy he was. The bride, I'll call her the bride, was sweet. She had that gentle politeness that makes you trust someone instantly. She shook my hand firmly, told me she'd always dreamed of an outdoor wedding with white flowers, maybe near a lake. I didn't plan on saying anything in that moment, but when my son talked about the financial struggles of doing something big, I felt something inside me shift. Crunching the numbers mentally, I remembered how much I was never able to offer in my own life. I never had a wedding party, never had a pretty ceremony, never had anything besides a rushed signature at the courthouse because our parents pushed us. Maybe that's why the idea hit me so hard. I wanted to give him what I never had. So I spoke. I'll pay. I'll cover everything. You two choose the dream place, and I'll handle the rest. The bride put her hand over her mouth, surprised. My son was speechless for a few seconds, then hugged me the way he hadn't since he was a teenager. In that moment, I felt like I was doing something right, something that finally made sense after so many years working and saving money. In the following days, I looked for venues all over the region. I visited a ceremony space in Sedona. But the winner was an event center in Flagstaff itself, a covered, elegant place with huge windows that let in the light of the 4 o'clock sunset. I booked it without thinking twice. I paid for flowers, decor, a small musical trio that would play soft versions of songs they liked. The bride was thrilled. My son, too. They messaged me all the time with photos, with tablecloth options, with lighting ideas. It was as if we were building something together, as if I finally had a legitimate place in his adult life. I was going to planning meetings, signing contracts, adjusting dates and schedules. In my head, everything was finally falling into place. I felt like a real father. And then, in the middle of this calm, something began to bother me. Small pauses from my son in conversations. Strange silences when I mentioned certain details. Messages taking longer to be answered. And one afternoon, at exactly around 3 p.m., while I was washing the patio, the call came. His voice sounded strange. And right there, I heard the words that would change everything. I always thought the past was like dust. You sweep it, organize everything, think you've cleaned it all, but it comes back into the corners when you least expect it. And that afternoon, before everything collapsed, my past came back in full force. I met the ex-wife in college in Tempe, when I still believed life was a straight line. Study, graduate, work, slowly earn your things. She was different, restless, intense, always changing her mind. She talked about living in New York someday, traveling across all the states. I liked that energy. I thought she pushed me forward, expanded my world. We were in our junior year when the surprise came. One September morning, she called me to talk near the library. I remember the feeling, and her holding a drugstore test with trembling hands. I'm pregnant. That was it. My brain shut down. I was in my early 20s, had no money saved, and had a completely naive idea of what it meant to raise someone. She was lost, too. She'd cry one minute, fall silent the next. There was no manual, no class to prepare you for that. When we told our families, chaos erupted immediately. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 days. My father told me, in that firm tone, "Now you have to be a man." Her parents were worse. They held a meeting, practically a court session, pressuring us to get married immediately, before the belly shows. Did I want to marry her? Yes. But like that? That way? No. Never like that, with everything rushed. Even so, we did what everyone expected. Shortly before the baby was born, we got married at the Phoenix courthouse, pushed more by fear than by love. It was fast, almost without speeches, without flowers, without celebration. I looked at her and thought, we'll make up for it later. We'll do it right later. That later never came. In the first years, life turned into a cruel marathon. I worked days at a gear shop, and at night, delivered food to make ends meet. I'd get home around 10 p.m., sometimes later, legs aching. She stayed with the baby, and I know that wore her down. But instead of pulling us closer, each week seemed to throw us farther apart. She said she felt trapped, said life had become a suffocating routine, said she'd lost herself. And I tried to understand. I really did. But when you're exhausted all the time, it's hard to see around you. I just wanted to survive the next month, pay rent, buy milk, keep breathing. She wanted a life that seemed to exist only in her head, a kind of freedom that never fit what we had. When the youngest son was born, things got even heavier. 2 small kids, a woman who looked like she was carrying the world on her back, and a man trying to be 2 people at once. The signs began discreetly. Phone calls she took in the bedroom, messages arriving late at night, quick outings saying she needed some air. I suspected, but refused to believe it. It was easier to imagine it was exhaustion, postpartum depression, anything other than another man, until the day it was impossible to ignore. We had a big argument one morning. I had just come home from my main job, tired, sweaty, worried about bills, and found the sink full, the kids crying, and her sitting on the porch staring into nothing, as if none of it had anything to do with her. I spoke louder than I should have. She answered louder still, and in the middle of the fight she blurted out, "I have someone who understands me, someone who sees me. I can't keep living this life." She said, "someone," and that broke something in me that never healed again. It didn't take long. One summer night while the kids slept, she packed her bags. No goodbye, no explanation, no looking back. She left the house silent, as if she had never belonged there. The next morning, I had to tell a small child that his mother wouldn't be coming back for a while. He cried so much I thought he'd lose his breath. I became father and mother in the same day, because I had no choice. My parents helped as much as they could, my sister too, but in the end, I was the one holding everything up. I cooked lunch, picked them up from school, checked fevers at dawn, worked double, and still tried to smile at breakfast. Years went by like that. Years wondering how someone could choose to walk away like that. Years watching my kids grow with questions I didn't know how to answer. And despite all that, I still thought that when my oldest son built his own life, I'd be part of it. I thought that after everything I'd done, there'd be room for me. The most ironic thing is that when that phone call from my son came about the wedding, I still remember the feeling of having signed the last contract for the event center in Flagstaff, as if I had finally put something back into place inside me. The coordinator, a patient woman named Sandra, handed me a folder full of papers organized by color, the menu, the schedule for the ceremony at 4 p.m., the clearance of the hall until 10 p.m. She smiled, saying everything was perfect, and I wanted to believe that. The bride had a charming calmness when she talked about the wedding. She'd send me reference photos by text even while I was still at work. I'd open each image carefully, even if I was on my 10-minute break. She'd write things like, "Imagine these flowers near the window," or "Do you think these chairs match the light tablecloths?" I answered everything, tried to take part in everything because it was easy to like her. She had that way of including everyone, even me, who barely knew how to handle this kind of ceremony. One of the afternoons we went to the venue together. She walked through the hall all happy, and I felt like I was part of building something beautiful. Not for me, but for them. My son seemed genuinely happy. He hugged me, thanked me, laughed. In some moments I could even forget that our history had been a battlefield in the past. The following days were a whirlwind. I talked to vendors in the morning, replied to emails during my lunch break, signed payment authorizations at night. None of it tired me, but my son started acting strange. Small things. At first, almost invisible. And I kept collecting them the way someone collects crumbs on a trail, trying to understand if they meant something. He talked less to me. He'd start sentences and stop halfway. When the bride mentioned something about the flowers, he'd look away. When I brought up details about dinner, he'd swallow hard. I kept telling myself it had to be stress. Everyone gets a little lost before a wedding. I held on to that excuse because it was far more comfortable than facing the other possibility, that some shadow was returning. The shadow of my ex-wife always comes back. Always. One day, around 3:30 in the afternoon, when I was carrying groceries from the car into the kitchen, my phone vibrated. It was my son. I answered right away. His voice was cold, controlled to the extreme, as if he had rehearsed every syllable. He started talking about the ceremony, the number of guests, some adjustments. I listened while setting the groceries on the counter, thinking it would be just another conversation about details. But his tone started to tangle, and I felt that old sensation. The kind you get when you know you're about to hear something bad, but there's no way to dodge it. He paused for so long I had to ask if he was still on the line, and then he said it, with the tensest voice I've ever heard from him. "Dad, Mom isn't comfortable with you being at the wedding." I waited for him to continue. Waited for it to be just a loose, poorly explained sentence. But he added, "So, we think it's better if you don't come." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to shout, but nothing came out. I stayed silent, holding the phone. He kept talking, practical things, as if he were dealing with a shift change at work. He said I'd understand, that it's her day, that it's complicated for her. Her, always her. The woman who abandoned my children while they were sleeping. And now she wasn't comfortable. What destroyed me, though, wasn't her. It was him. It was my son saying that with such ease, as if he weren't stabbing me with every word. I forced myself to answer something. Maybe it sounded like an "I understand." And before I could say anything else, he ended the call. Just like that. I stayed there for several minutes, thinking about how much of my past I had buried, believing everything was resolved. But nothing was. Life always finds a way to remind you of what hasn't healed. And there, with the phone in my hand, I realized something inside me had broken again. Update 1. The next day, the house was silent, my mind running in circles, repeating my son's words. It felt like an impossible scene to believe. I paid for everything. It was the money from my entire working life, and the mother who simply fled their lives now had the power to erase me from the picture. But the more I thought about it, the bigger the emptiness grew, and with it, a decision I didn't fully understand yet. It was when I sat at the dining table with the ceremony paper spread out in front of me that the idea began to take shape. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of a strange kind of self-preservation. I stood up and went to get the phone to make calls I never imagined making. I wasn't going to bankroll this. I wasn't going to pay for a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. The first call was to the event center at 7 a.m., the moment they opened. The woman at the desk asked if I needed to adjust anything in the schedule. I need to cancel everything. She went silent for a few seconds, then said she was sorry, that there were fees, that the deadline had already passed. I said I'd pay the fees. She confirmed, explained the details, asked if I was absolutely sure. I told her yes, that it was decided. I hung up and took a deep breath, but it didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like payback. Then came the catering company, the florist, the lighting service, the band that would play soft versions of old songs my son and the bride liked. Some vendors tried to talk me out of it. Others said they understood. All charged their cancellation fees with a kind of naturalness that unsettled me. By late morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of cancellation confirmations in my email and a double-edged feeling in my chest. Guilt and relief. Guilt because deep down I knew this would ruin my son's day. Relief because for the first time in a long time, I had fought something that was hurting me. The rest of the week was silence. Total silence. No message from him. No questions from the bride. No attempt from my ex-wife to prove her supposed moral superiority. I kept living as if watching the world outside move in slow motion, and then came the wedding day. Or the day there was supposed to be a wedding. I woke up early, before 7. The sky over Flagstaff was clear, bright. Around 9:30, I imagined the movement at the event center. Guests arriving, cars parking, people fixing clothes in rearview mirrors, the nerves. And then I imagined the moment they'd realize none of it existed anymore. The bridal suite locked, doors closed. Staff saying no event was scheduled. Chaos. And although I told myself it would be a temporary shock, I knew it would be more than that. The ex-wife would try to blame someone. My son would try to understand how everything had collapsed. The bride, she'd probably be devastated. At 10:25, my phone started ringing. His name on the screen. My heart stuck in my throat. I didn't answer. Not yet. I waited a few seconds. The phone vibrated again, and this time I let it ring until the end. At 11:05, the messages started coming, then another, and another, until finally another call. I answered. My son's voice was out of control now. None of the rehearsed tone from before. This time, it was pure anger mixed with fear, frustration, desperation. He asked what had happened, how this was possible, repeating that guests were arriving and everything was locked. I listened in silence. He called me by my name, not Dad. That hurt more than I'd ever admit. And only when he said, "You need to fix this immediately," I didn't argue. I said calmly, "I canceled everything." Silence on the other end. I waited. He took a deep breath and asked, "Why?" And I answered the same way he had spoken to me days earlier. "It's your wedding. You decide who gets in." I decided I won't pay. That was it. So simple and so devastating. His reaction was immediate. Confusion, disbelief, anger, pleas hidden between harsh phrases. But I hung up first. This time, I hung up. And for a few minutes I stayed there with the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of what I'd done. It wasn't pride. It wasn't joy. It was a deep, tired kind of sadness. And I knew there was no going back. The call where I told him the truth didn't end there. Right after I hung up, the phone started ringing again. Calls, messages, more calls. I decided to answer once more and say nothing. He was speaking so loudly I could hear his breathing. "You ruined everything. Everybody's here. What am I supposed to do now?" I let him talk. I listened to every word, every accusation, every insult, until he finally called me trash. When I tried to respond, he didn't let me. He ran over every sentence I attempted. It was as if I were an enemy, someone who had broken into his life just to cause damage. "You did this out of jealousy, Dad. Just admit it. You can't stand that Mom is happy here. You wanted to sabotage our day just because she gets to be here and you don't." Jealousy? Of the woman who destroyed her own family? Of the woman who abandoned her boys when they were still in diapers? I realized nothing I said would change it. The version he believed was already written in his head. "I've already said everything," I told him. "The rest is up to you." I hung up. And this time, even when the phone started ringing again, I didn't answer. Later, I found out what happened from a friend who had been invited. The event center stayed closed. Locked gates. Staff telling people the contract had been canceled. Guests standing in the parking lot with confused looks. People holding gifts in their hands, standing in the sun, not knowing where the entrance was. The bride, poor thing, apparently stayed inside the car with her makeup beginning to smudge. And my ex-wife, oh, that one I can picture perfectly, gesturing wildly, pointing fingers, speaking loudly, looking for someone to blame, to humiliate, to accuse in the middle of all the chaos. My son, cornered by the disaster, ended up taking everyone to the only place left, the backyard of the ex-wife's house. A small backyard, surrounded by an old wooden fence, with uneven patches of grass and a plastic table she used for barbecues. That's where, according to him, the wedding would happen. There. From what I later heard, only a few guests stayed. Some went home, others left embarrassed, and even her relatives tried to keep neutral expressions, but no one could hide their discomfort. The bride's parents were visibly upset. They hadn't traveled across the state to see their daughter get married beside a rusty grill. My son tried improvising, asking for patience, borrowing chairs from neighbors. My ex-wife wandered around as if she were the hostess of an event she had never planned, repeating, "In the end, love is what matters." And the bride, in the middle of it all, was motionless, almost like she wasn't even there. Hours later, when the chaos had finally settled, she was the one who most insisted on understanding what had actually happened. She didn't want vague explanations. She didn't want rehearsed answers. She pulled her husband into the kitchen and told him to tell her the truth. Her voice wasn't angry, wasn't aggressive. It was firm. The kind of firmness that comes when someone finally connects the dots. She asked why I would cancel the venue. He said I had lost it. She asked if he had uninvited me. He denied it entirely. She asked if the ex-wife had demanded my exclusion. He dodged the question. That's when the ex-wife appeared at the doorway and tried to intervene. But the bride cut her off quickly, and far more sharply than someone so sweet usually would. "Please let me talk to my husband." The ex-wife insisted, claiming she was trying to help, that I had issues, that the situation was all my fault. But the bride wasn't buying it, and it was there that everything began to unravel for her. The contradictions, the mismatched stories, the ready-made accusations, the accounts that didn't align. She understood the story had two truths, the one my son believed, and the one that had actually happened. And in that instant, she recognized a pattern of manipulation, guilt, distortion, a pattern that stretched across years, long before she ever existed in their lives. She realized it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was bigger, something that had always been there, but she only saw it when it finally hit her directly. And when the improvised party ended, if you could even call it a party, no one seemed truly married. The next day, after that pathetic wedding, she went back to her parents' house. She didn't tell anyone. She simply packed her things, stuffed her wrinkled dress into a suitcase, got in the car, and drove to Prescott Valley, where her parents lived. She stayed there, in the bedroom she had left years earlier. I didn't know this on the same day. I learned later from other sources. What I heard was that she couldn't stop crying, that she couldn't understand how someone could let their own mother destroy the wedding so openly, that she felt ashamed of what the guests had seen, and that she wondered if she had ignored signs that were right in front of her. During the following week, she tried to organize her thoughts. Sometimes she thought she needed to go back, talk, understand. Sometimes she thought she needed to run forever. She missed my son, but she missed the person she thought he was, not the man who bowed to his mother until hurting himself. Meanwhile, at their house, the ex-wife found the perfect moment to step in, and she entered as if she had a key. She started showing up every day. My ex had just separated from her current husband. She brought cooked meals, cleaned the kitchen, followed my son to work, texted him asking if he'd eaten. I just don't want you to end up like your father. You deserve someone who puts you first. If she doesn't understand your needs, she doesn't understand you. My son, emotionally shaken, confused, ashamed by the wedding disaster, began accepting that affection. The bride, watching this, still didn't want to give up. What she didn't know, and I didn't either, was that another character was about to reappear. The ex-wife's former partner, the man she built that parallel marriage with, the one that destroyed mine. He emailed me. Yes, an email. Formal, direct, almost cold considering the subject. He said he needed to talk to me, that there were things I had the right to know. I ignored him for 2 days, but he sent another, and another, until I gave in. We met at a cafe in Flagstaff. He walked in slightly hunched, maybe expecting me to hit him on sight for being my wife's lover in the past. But I was too tired to feel anger. I asked him to sit. He asked for water. When he began speaking, it sounded like he was ripping something out of his throat that had been stuck for years. He said the ex-wife always had a frightening ability to twist facts, that she played emotional games, that she manipulated friends and coworkers to pity her, that she retold stories so convincingly he sometimes believed them himself. He said she talked about me constantly, described a man I had never been, absent, aggressive, indifferent. And she talked about the kids, reminding everyone how much she suffered because of the separation. She's not taking care of your son. She's shaping him, because she needs someone to confirm a lie she's always lived with, that she was the victim. It wasn't a total surprise, but hearing it from someone who lived with her for years, that gave it another weight. He continued. He said she had been pressuring my son to cut all ties with me, to stand on the right side of the story, to prove she was the wronged mother and I was the cruel obstacle who always tried to keep them apart. And then, before leaving, he said the sentence that haunted me the most. She only knows how to love someone when that person is in ruins, because that's how she feels needed. When he left, I stayed there. It was strange. I should have been angry, but all I felt was exhaustion. And while I tried to digest all that, across town, the bride was packing her bags again, not to return, but to breathe far away from the chaos. She wasn't fleeing her husband. She was fleeing the mother-in-law who was the shadow behind him. Update 2. The bride, still living with her parents in Prescott Valley, tried to go back a few times to talk. She tried to understand, tried to save what was left of that marriage that had practically begun among rubble. But talking to him was impossible. He accused her of abandonment, said she owed loyalty to his mother, and in the tensest moments, he asked whether she preferred his father's side after everything. She couldn't answer because none of it made sense. She was married to him, not to me. But my ex had done meticulous work. Anyone not with her was automatically against her. He and his wife even tried a few counseling sessions after that improvised wedding, but things truly began to fall apart when he made an announcement that crushed any remaining attempt at balance. One night, sitting on the couch of the house where they were supposed to be building their life together, he told his wife, in a low but determined voice, that his mother was going to live with them, not for a while, not as something temporary, live with them permanently. His justification was simple and at the same time devastating. He said his mother was emotionally destroyed after her separation, that she was fragile, that she had no one, and that he needed to be a good son. He spoke with an almost religious seriousness, as if it were a sacred mission placed in his hands. His wife listened in silence until she couldn't anymore. She stood up, placed her hands on the kitchen table, and said she didn't agree, that it would invade every possible boundary, that turning their home into a place where the mother-in-law dictated the rules would be the end of the marriage. He didn't like that. He said she was being selfish, said family came before everything, repeated that his mother needed him more than ever. She, trying to keep her voice steady, replied, "You have to choose. Either you start your marriage with me, or you move your life over to her." And he chose. He chose his mother. Little by little, the bride realized nothing she said would have space in his life while the mother was there, glued to him, guiding every sentence, every reaction. She told me, much later, that there were moments when she felt she wasn't talking to her husband, but to the mother-in-law's voice coming out of his mouth. The marriage lasted little more than a few weeks. In the end, one day she came home, calm, sat down in front of him, and said she couldn't do it anymore. She didn't cry. She simply explained that she couldn't live in a house where the mother-in-law's shadow occupied every room, even the ones that didn't have furniture yet. And he didn't try to stop her. Maybe he was tired too. Maybe he believed that letting her go was the only way to show devotion to his mother. The same man who met me at the cafe in Flagstaff had told me that after the ceremony disaster, she began acting as if everyone around her owed her something. Attention, apologies. He said she talked about my son as if he were a prize she had finally regained, that she followed him everywhere, that she reorganized her entire schedule to accompany his every step, and that when he, the partner, tried to talk about boundaries, she flipped everything upside down, blamed him, cried, locked herself in the bedroom, made scenes, played the victim. Eventually, he realized he was living with a woman who didn't love anyone. That was the last straw. He told me he asked for a divorce. While all of this was happening, for the first time, I chose to remain still, not interfere. In my new life, my partner, a kind, mature, patient woman, moved into my home. She didn't ask questions about my past, didn't give opinions about my children's choices. She simply stayed by my side when I needed her. But silence never lasts forever. One random afternoon, my phone rang. My oldest son's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I only picked up when I realized he wouldn't give up. His voice was different. There was no anger, no accusation. It was low, almost timid. "Dad, can we talk?" I closed my eyes for a second. I answered calmly, "Not now, and maybe not anytime soon." He stayed silent for a few seconds, then said he needed to fix things, that he wanted to get his life back on track, that he thought he had gone too far. I listened, every word. I didn't interrupt, but when he finished, I told him the only thing I truly believed. "I've already done my job as a father. The next part is yours." I didn't say it out of cruelty. I said it out of clarity. He tried to ask the youngest son to intervene, but I didn't give in. Not out of pride, but out of self-respect, something it took me decades to learn. The bride, now ex, is rebuilding her life in peace. My oldest son is trying to find an identity that doesn't depend on his mother. My youngest son remains steady, far from the chaos. We raise children for the world, not for us. And when they become adults, our duty stops being to guide and becomes to let go.